Well, this is Dave Gaddis, and today is March 26, 2015. Today we're interviewing Jim Parajon here in his office at Arlington, Texas. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Why don't we start at the very beginning and tell us when and where you were born?
Okay. Again, Jim Parajon. I was born in New Haven, Connecticut. I'm 51 years old, so I was born in 1963.
Okay. And what did your folks do that you were in Connecticut?
It's a good question. My dad was a lifelong IBM employee. He did a lot with computer sales, and that's really where we started our life. Did
you stay in Connecticut your whole childhood, or did you move?
No, we moved quite a bit, mostly on the East Coast. We moved from the New Haven area to a couple other locations in Connecticut, and then into New York, into Poughkeepsie, New York, where I was really raised through high school.
Okay. And graduated high school there?
Yes, I did.
And then where did you go to college?
Then I went to college in Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is a small liberal arts school in central Pennsylvania.
Okay, and what did you study?
I studied history and English.
Okay, and what interested you in history and English?
Well, from my perspective, I was always one of those guys that really enjoyed learning from our past. So I enjoyed hearing about the Renaissance, and I enjoyed medieval times, what's going on in those days, as well as the World War I, World War II periods, things like that. So I really enjoyed the history. I got into the English primarily because I enjoyed writing. So I kind of combined two interests, one sort of learning from the past, and the second one really the understanding about enjoyment of the writing.
Okay, and we were just discussing the fact that you also played basketball and baseball.
Yeah, I played college basketball and college baseball for the college, and really enjoyed it. I was happy to say it was I'm a big sports guy. In fact, as we do in the interview, this is March Madness, so I'll have the games on tonight when I get home from teaching a class.
Okay. So you got your degree, and what did you do then?
Well, I got my degree, a bachelor's degree from Dickinson College, and then I decided to go to graduate school at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst.
Okay, and what did you choose Amherst?
It was a great question. I had been looking at graduate schools, and I had a choice between going to law school, Carnegie Mellon, or going into and get my master's for regional planning. And like all 18-year-olds, I kind of looked at that and said, well, I think I'd like to be a regional planner with an idea, quite frankly, of being a developer.
Okay. And so how did you get from history and English to regional planning?
Sure. Well, during the summer, my grandfather, who lived in outside Pittsburgh, he had been a developer and had run a bank and a coal company. Interesting mix in those days. And every summer I would work, or most of the summers I would work for him, cleaning bricks and doing construction work. And I really enjoyed kind of watching things being built, and I liked the physical environment. And I thought that it would make sense for me to get a planning degree that I could parlay into a real estate career.
Okay. And so, did you have a major professor at UMass Amherst?
Yeah, my favorite professor, and again, I had great professors at the University of Massachusetts, but the one that my faculty advisor was a fellow named John Mullen. And Mr. Mullen was instrumental in my career growth and my professional growth. He was just a wonderful individual. I enjoyed his guidance and his leadership through the 2 years of my master's program at UMass at Amherst. He was an individual who ran a consulting business as well as taught. So he gave me a really good practical understanding of how planning applies. And I really parlayed that to my first career opportunity, which was at the Bucks County Planning Commission outside Philadelphia, where I served as a community planner.
Okay. Any other classmates from your class at UMass?
Yeah, I had really wonderful classmates. In fact, one of my classmates, a woman named Pamela Brown, was inducted into the fellows the College of Fellows at the same time I was, which was just absolutely fantastic. She and I went to school together and we hung out together, and she was actually one of the brightest people I have ever met. So I was thrilled and honored to be part of the election when she also was elected. And I've stayed close to some of my classmates, which has been nice, and I've certainly followed them professionally, and they've all had really productive careers, which is very nice.
Okay. Did you do a thesis or a capstone project?
Yes, I actually did a master's project on an incubator, basically an incubator operations manual. So this is in the 80s, where incubators were starting to be thought of, maybe not in the way that they are today with, you know, partnerships with research universities and things like that. They're really more how to commercialize business opportunities from small startup companies. And so I worked with an incubator facility in Chicopee, Massachusetts, and I wrote their operations manual, which covered a range of how the incubators work together and the companies work together, what type of supportive environment they need to be successful. It was really an interesting experience. In fact, one of the companies I remembered in those days had taken a military application and was trying to commercialize it. And I think they were successful. It had to do with visualization of what you see through aerial photos. So it was really just fantastic, and that's how I got my master's project through, and it was approved. And so I graduated from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst with a master's in regional planning.
Okay. And it sounds like a little bit of economic development in there too.
Absolutely.
So you said then you went to Bucks County?
Yes, my first career job, I interviewed with a fellow named Michael Frank, and he was the director of Bucks County Planning Commission, and I was successful in that interview process. So my first job was as a community planner for the Bucks County Planning Commission.
And what projects did you work on?
Well, what I did is I served as basically the planner for several of the communities that were a part of Bucks County. In those days, a lot of cities didn't have staff planners. They used the county planning agency to serve for that purpose. One of probably the most interesting project I worked on was a joint basically zoning code for a series of 6 communities that were in Bucks County. And writing a code for 6 different communities, one code was a challenge, but again, it taught me what happens when communities can collaborate together. And in fact, they did, and they wrote, we wrote a code for them, a zoning code that covered all 6 municipalities, which was fascinating to me. That was true regional planning.
Mm-hmm. Any other projects in Bucks County of interest?
We did, I started moving a little bit more into master planning of large sites. There was a couple industrial sites that were underutilized in the southern part of the county, and I was asked to take a look at some master planning of that. And obviously master planning in an old industrial facility represents an opportunity but some challenges. So that was also probably one of the other projects that I recall pretty clearly, but it was really just a wonderful first experience out of my grad school.
Okay. And how long were you in Bucks County?
I was there a few years,
okay.
And then I I wanted to move on to the private consulting world. So I ended up working for a company called Lanaz Mueller Associates, and they were out of Princeton, New Jersey. And they were a small boutique planning firm that represented communities, municipalities throughout New Jersey and parts of Pennsylvania, essentially as their planning consultants. And during that time, I learned a tremendous amount from Jerry Lanaz and Mike Mueller. They were the 2 partners in the firm and myself, so it was a small group, and I had the opportunity to essentially be the staff planner for several of the communities, including a community called West Windsor Township, which was right on the New Jersey Transit line that runs from Philadelphia up to New York City. And it was a booming community that really had a lot going for it, and I got an opportunity to work closely with that community, and that was probably one of the signature opportunities that I had. Another one, we did a project for Lenox, China, which I thought was funny. I was recently married, Lenox, China, I actually knew about Lenox, China, which was interesting. I'm not a big China person. But we did a project for them in terms of a potential expansion of their facility. So those are a few of those things. But I think what I remember most about my time as a consultant with Lennaz Muir was just the ability to move quickly through a project, think about it from the beginning to end initially, so that you could be successful and the client would be happy with the end product. And just really fascinating. It was also my first opportunity to do public testimony at rezoning cases and special use permitting and things like that. And in those days, you had to be certified as a professional planner in the state of New Jersey in order to be testify. So I was fortunate to be able to do that and pass the exam for that. And but that was my first experience in really giving public testimony, which, you know, the first time you do it, it's a little scary. You know, but once you get practice at it, it becomes something that's pretty normal for you.
And New Jersey's kind of unique in the requirement to have a professional planner certification to practice in the state, right?
Absolutely. I still remember the first time I testified, the attorney for the other side questioned my qualifications, and it was a little bit like a cross-examination you would see on in a court. You know, the good news is I was seen as an expert, qualified as expert in the testimony, but I was a little uncomfortable for about 15 minutes going through, you know, why you were an expert. And again, I was 20-something at the time, and it was a little daunting.
Okay. And then did you move on from there?
Yeah, from Lennaz Muir, I was recruited to join a larger architect and engineering firm called Buchart Horn, and they were out of York, Pennsylvania. And they were what I would term a pretty large regional architect engineering planning firm that was really based primarily around Pennsylvania, New Jersey, a little bit in Maryland, and that was sort of their region. And they were a very strong player, did a lot of work with departments of transportation, did a lot of work for communities in regard to water and sewer master planning. So my career changed slightly when I moved to the larger consulting firm, in that I had a little more management experience that I picked up. I also had a chance to work on a few more projects related to transportation. In fact, that became one of sort of the niches I guess I would pick up over the years, was working on transportation planning projects and doing master planning for counties and cities as it relates to their transportation needs, and really enjoyed that. The other aspect of that is I got a chance to work with a lot of departments of transportation, both in New Jersey as well as in Pennsylvania, and they're broken up in regions in Pennsylvania, so I got a chance to work for a variety of different regions, stretching from Philadelphia all the way to Pittsburgh, so I really enjoyed that as well.
Any projects that particularly stand out from that time?
You know, they're all interesting projects. There's never one project that stood out to me. What really kind of stood out was, again, the pace and the effectiveness that we would need to achieve in order to be successful with our client. It was a very competitive environment in those days. Consultants were competing very heavily against each other for very significant jobs, and so you had to be on the ball. You had to be very successful in how you put together your project. You had to be on time, you had to be on budget, and that really carried with me as I transitioned to my next opportunity, which was with a company called URS Griner, which was, again, it was a larger, more national architect and engineering planning firm. And in fact, I think URS is probably one of the largest architect planning and engineering firms in the world right now. And I was moved towards the Baltimore, Maryland area with my family. At the time, I had a young son who was recently born. And so we became new parents, and I took a new opportunity as a consultant with URS Greiner. And my career again changed a little bit. I continued to gain more professional planning experience, particularly in the transportation area. I also picked up some more management experience, which was certainly a rewarding opportunity to work with some great people. And I had an opportunity to be a dad, which was really, that's the most proud moment. You know, when I'm a big believer. I'm a dad of a wonderful teenage daughter and a college-age son, and very happy about that. But that's where I started as a parent, and so it's always left a very significant mark in my life knowing about that.
Okay. Any projects at URS that stand out?
We did a lot of very large-scale projects. Probably the most difficult project I worked on was the Woodrow Wilson Bridge project, which is really the bridge that connects Virginia with Maryland through D.C. And if you can imagine what happens when you need to replace a bridge like that, and all the different players, you know, you have 3 states, you have the federal government, you have a lot of specific influences. The URS team was a lead in regard to the Woodrow Wilson Bridge project, and one of my tasks was to work on a toll feasibility study, which is try to identify what was the likely toll that could be charged and was tolerable for the businesses and the people that would use that facility. And that was an incredibly complex project, one of the most significant ones that I can recall when I worked for URS, and it was just a big challenge. The other thing I learned at URS is it was a very competitive environment in those days for opportunities. And we at URS was growing their planning presence, and I was one of the responsible parties in that. And I would recall applying, competing for some of the planning opportunities, and we were very successful on transportation projects. We did quite a bit of transportation planning for most of the counties along the Maryland coast, Calvert County, Queen Anne's County, several of those. So we had a pretty good market for that, but we wanted to expand into more of the general planning market for the communities. And for the life of me, every time we would get shortlisted, we would go to the finalists, we'd go to the interview, and we'd think we had it made. And then this firm called the Chesapeake Group would show up, a fellow named Howard Cohn. And Howard Cohn would beat us every single time. And I got fed up. He beat us, I think, 3 or 4 times, and finally I called him and I asked him to come to lunch because I was tired of losing to him. So we ended up having lunch, and we ended up having a great professional partnership and a personal partnership. He had a small boutique planning firm in Baltimore, Maryland, and he was just an incredibly talented man, and I'd rather work with him than lose to him. And that really was one of the other things that I learned, that the value of finding good partners sometimes is really so valuable to not just to your professional career, but to your personal life. And I count Howard as a very close friend.
Okay.
And mentor.
Okay. And any projects you did with him that?
Well, yeah, we actually did quite a few projects together. One was in Cambridge, Maryland, where it was a downtown that was struggling a little bit, and they asked us to work on a project to essentially revitalize the downtown with a major hotel resort as one of the main components. And Howard was incredibly valuable in that experience. He had a very strong economic development background, and I learned a lot in that particular specialty from Howard, as well as how to communicate very effectively to a variety of different public entities. And that's probably one of the most important projects I had a chance to work on with URS. Okay. From URS, as I said, I was a new dad, and I was doing a lot of traveling with URS, you know, and traveling out of state. And I felt like, as a family, we made the decision that it'd be nice to be home more, especially as a new dad. So I took a job as one of the first transportation planner for the city of Naperville, Illinois, and worked for a fellow named Bob Colleen. Bob was the director at the time, and he had hired me. We actually met during a conference down in Florida. We were waiting for something else to happen. We just struck up a conversation, and he indicated he was looking for a transportation person, and we talked about my background, and he said, I'd like to fly you to Naperville, Illinois, which I hadn't even heard of. So I ended up going to Naperville, and we moved my family there and had a really wonderful time developing a transportation program for the city of Naperville.
Okay.
And then my career takes another little turn. My parents had lived in Raleigh, North Carolina for several years. They had moved from New York down to North Carolina, kind of getting ready to retire. My dad actually did retire at that point from IBM. And my dad sent me a clipping that said that the town of Cary was looking for a planning professional. And, gee, Jim, that's your career. What do you think about coming on down and looking at it? And quite frankly, I was very happy in Naperville. I was not terribly interested. Well, I did get a call one day from the town of Cary. I hadn't submitted anything, but they had called me and asked if I would be interested. And I said, well, I really am not interested in moving. I like what I'm doing, but I had thought about it a little bit more and thought, well, maybe it would be worthwhile talking. And sure enough, we did, and I ended up, long story short, moving my family down to town of Cary, North Carolina, which is really the community that's next to the Research Triangle Park. So just an absolutely fantastic, wonderful community. And I ended up working with the town of Cary for about 8 years.
Okay. And what position?
I led their development group.
Okay.
And then it kind of grew. I picked up land use and transportation as well over the years. I was really fortunate. There's a city manager, fortunately he passed away, a fellow named Bill Coleman, and he was just an incredible mentor to me in terms of how to get things done in municipal government. And I have such fond memories of the town of Cary. It was really where I grew professionally and have some great friends that are still there. I got a chance to work on great planning projects, comprehensive plans, growth management plans. It was at a time when the town of Cary was probably one of the most progressive planning agencies in the country. And I got an opportunity to participate there and work with guys like the director at the time, which was Jeff Ulma, and just really the opportunities there. We did impact analysis work, impact fees, and we did changes to our development processes that I've taken with me in my other parts of my career. Just really very cutting edge planning work that was done there, and really happy. I work with great people, some of the most talented staff I've ever had the opportunity to work with.
Okay. And what years were this? Is this 90s?
Those were in the 90s, and okay. Then I had the opportunity. A fellow named George Chapman was the planning director for the city of Raleigh, and we would serve together on a regional transportation committee, a metropolitan planning organization. They had a transportation committee, and George and I would be part of that team, and we would typically disagree, as city to city would do occasionally. But we had a deep respect for each other. I certainly respected him dearly. He was a wonderful director, probably, again, one of the most talented men I have known. And he asked me if I would be interested in joining the city of Raleigh as their assistant director, with the eye that George was going to retire relatively soon, and that would be an opportunity that I might want to consider. And so I joined the city of Raleigh, and really never looked back. It was an opportunity to work primarily on a lot of the larger scale planning projects. I moved from the development side to more of the strategic planning side at the time. So we worked on everything from large scale sector plans and corridor plans and neighborhood plans to some of economic development strategies. Had an opportunity to really implement the livable downtown plan that was a very signature element of the downtown Raleigh growth that has occurred over that I've seen over the last 2 decades, and just really been very impressed by it. And one of the interesting things about that plan was it was called 5 and 5, and those were 5 signature actions that the city was going to take and be successful at in 5 years. And so that put a little pressure on making sure we got some things accomplished, and I'm proud to say City of Raleigh was able to do that with some great assistance with a lot of great staff. That was also the point at which I had the opportunity to meet Mitch Silver, who served as the director in that department when George retired. And Mitch and
So
I,
you didn't get to move up after
I did not get to move up, and those things happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes in a career you compete against someone, and sometimes you're successful, and sometimes that other person gets that opportunity.
Yeah, Mitch, you could understand.
Yeah.
So,
Mitch.
so how was working for Mitch?
It was great. Mitch and I had a wonderful collaborative spirit. We worked a lot together on things. I think we were very aligned with our thought processes behind how to approach planning, how to approach the development. We were all about trying to accomplish things. We were all about trying to take a big idea into action, and really had a wonderful working relationship with Mitch. That served me well. I really enjoyed that. I think Mitch would probably also tell you the same, that we consider ourselves friends, and it's great to catch up on an annual basis during the national conference, for instance. And it's just been really a wonderful opportunity. I'm thrilled that he has gotten that opportunity to work in City of New York. I think they're well served with that hire, so that's great. From the City of Raleigh.
Well, before we leave that, were you there when Mitch was APA president?
No, I was not.
So, okay.
He was about to become APA president.
And so you decided to move on.
Yeah, I felt at that point that it was important to look at a director opportunity, and City of Arlington at the time was looking for a director to take their department to a different level, as well as really try to help move the Cowboy Stadium project to completion, which was obviously a $1.2 billion stadium that needed to be built in about 2.5 years. For a city of our size, 400,000 people, it was a big project. And so I moved from Raleigh, North Carolina to Texas.
And what year was this?
It would have been in 2006.
Okay.
So I've been here about 8 years, and people tease me. They say I'm not a Texan, and I get that, but I'm trying to be certainly supportive of anything Texas. I love Arlington. It's a great city to work with. I've had the opportunity as the director in the department. My responsibilities have grown over the years. It started out that we had kind of what I call more traditional planning department with the development side and a strategic planning side and a GIS side, and it's grown to include real estate and health services and urban design, the housing authority. So it grew from about 50 people to 140 people in terms of a staffing model. And so over the years I've had an opportunity to work on, again, a lot of interesting projects. Some of the ones that I found very interesting as a professional planner were, obviously the Cowboy Stadium project. How do you facilitate all the different construction and non-construction aspects to focus attention on being successful in completing that project, to things like what happens when you have a tornado that hit our city in 2012, I believe. And how does a planning department step up and actually help lead that effort? It's a pretty significant deal, trying to get people who have suffered severely in their life back into their homes and sort of in a stable environment. So it's really touched me on a personal level, being able to help people when they have those types of situations. And that's happened in Arlington a few times, and it's really, I'm very passionate about trying to help folks that have a need and have struggled in their life. I think that's part of the reason I probably have enjoyed being a professional planner for so many years.
And you were recently promoted to Deputy City Manager?
Yes, I was fortunate. Our city manager, Trey Yelverton, who hired me originally as the director, he became the city manager a few years ago, and he's doing an unbelievably great job. He asked if I would come on up and be the Deputy City Manager over Economic Development and Capital Investment, and I started that opportunity in January, and really have enjoyed it. I have responsibilities over things like aviation and convention center and public works departments and the community development and planning department and economic development. So the range of things that I get an opportunity to work on or touch and try to help guide when it's necessary is very broad, and it sort of is a nice little challenge after being a professional planner for 29 years.
Well, I've always thought that planning is a good training for city management, but
you know,
I don't know if you found the same thing.
I actually do. I think that as planners we're taught to think not just strategically but broadly, and really try to look at a broad perspective. One of the things that I found as a professional planner, to be successful you have to be able to understand other people's perspectives, because without that you're going to make a decision or you're going to move in a direction that may be a little bit too parochial, a little bit too narrow. And as professional planners, if we can see other people's perspectives, we're going to make the strongest decision or the strongest recommendation that we can. And I think as a deputy city manager who has a larger span of responsibility, that becomes really, really critical, because there's more components that you have to look at now. And I know, Dave, you know that, looking at not just what the planning side of the equation might say, but what the budget side might say, or what the strategic environment might say, or the timing of that issue might be. So it's just really, I've very much enjoyed it. And again, I've been fortunate through all my career and all the different opportunities. I've worked with just really great people, and that's actually one bit of advice I'd give a young planner. There's a lot of opportunities that you'll get a chance to try to decide on. You know, should I take this opportunity or that opportunity? And I don't think you'll ever be wrong if you take the opportunity where the people that you would work with are the nicest, the most, not always necessarily the most talented, but the most motivated. And if you work with motivated, nice, talented people that are happy in their opportunities, their jobs, that's the place that you want to work.
Let's go back and talk about your involvement in the professional associations. I assume it was APA when you joined, or was it prior to that with AIP and ASPO?
It was APA.
Okay.
I've been a member since the day I graduated from University of Massachusetts at Amherst.
And was that because one of the professors encouraged you to, or you were just interested in?
You know, I think it was Mr. Mullen, Professor Mullen, who really said, you know, this is your career. You need to be part of that. And I guess I really did not think anything of it other than, yeah, I'm part of that association now. In fact, I can still remember as a student that a bunch of my fellow students and I, we flew out to Los Angeles for one of their national conferences. And I can still remember, I think there were 5 or 6 of us. We stayed in the same hotel room for 3 or 4 days because that's all we could afford. But we learned a tremendous amount, and I think that being part of the association and then becoming a certified planner is critical. I think that organization framework is really important to someone who wants to have a career as a planner.
Do you remember when you took the AICP exam?
Oh, I'd have to look at my thing. I guess it was in 1991, it looks like.
Okay, actually, that may be the same year I took it. And that was a multiple choice exam at that point in time?
Yeah, yes, it was. Yeah, I still remember, I can't say I remember the questions, but I remember praying that I was going to pass. And fortunately, I passed.
And you did on the first time?
Yes, I did.
And then you mentioned the New Jersey PP designation. As I recall, the AICP exam was a prerequisite for that, or was it part of that? Or?
You know, Dave, I cannot remember. I don't believe that you had to have the AICP in order to sit for the professional playing degree, professional playing designation in New Jersey, but there was a years of experience that you had to have, and I don't really remember the application process well, but I remember that it was critical. You could not testify in the state of New Jersey without certainly being called into question without that, and that was important obviously as a professional consultant representing cities and other clients, that was important.
Now, you moved around a lot in your career. Did you ever get involved in APA in terms of chapter or section or division roles?
You know, it's probably one of my regrets. I probably would have wanted to be a little more active with maybe some of the opportunities for positions in the APA or AICP. I served on a lot of different committees, but they were sort of quick assignment committees. That was really with my work schedule and personal schedule. That worked really well for me. One of the ones that I really enjoyed, unfortunately it was because of a natural disaster, but when Hurricane Katrina hit, really devastated you know, communities obviously in Louisiana and Mississippi and some of the other southern states, and I was asked by APA to be part of an assessment team that got an opportunity to go down to Gulfport, Mississippi and assess the progress that they had been making after the hurricane. I think it was about a year or so after the hurricane, and had an opportunity to work with a panel, an assessment team, a lady from Charleston, South Carolina, and I think Birmingham, Alabama. And I was part of that assessment team, and we really found that there's a lot of work to be done. Is when someone suffers that type of natural devastation, you know, it's not just the physical, it's just the organizational strain on a community is dramatic. And that was actually one of the most important elements of the assessment. They just, quite frankly, did not have enough resources to pull themselves out of the problem quickly. But that was very interesting. So I've done some of those. I helped rewrite some of the documents that come out of APA and policy statements, and review some of those things over the years. But I would tell you, it's one of the things that if I had an opportunity to refocus a little bit, I would have tried to carve out more time for some of the APA and AICP work.
But you did go to a number of the conferences, and you built a network of relationships through APA?
Absolutely, yeah. I always tried to go to the national conference or some of the state conferences or even regional conferences, and I made a big point of trying to reach out to folks and try to develop a good network. And fortunately, with the way my career worked, I've worked in several different states, and I've had an opportunity to work in different environments, both in the private and public sector. So, you know, I get a chance to see quite a few of those folks over the years in different settings, and it's been just really great catching up. And you know, you never lose sight of you know, people that have helped you over your career, and it's great to catch up. You mentioned before the interview, we were talking about Jim Duncan, and I can still remember Jim and I worked together in Cary, North Carolina on some impact fee ordinances and things like that, and we stayed in touch. And when the opportunity with the city of Arlington in Texas came around, I called Jim and asked him, should I take it? You know, what's your thought in regard to Texas? And if you know Jim, you know, he's a big-time Texan, and he was very much an advocate of me coming here as quick as I could. And so I took his advice, and it's been good advice.
Okay. And then recently you were elected to the College of Fellows of AICP.
Yes.
What was that like?
That was just an incredible honor. You know, when I was asked to consider putting forth my nomination, quite frankly, I paused and said, I'm not sure that I'm worthy of that. I had thought about other fellows like Mr. Duncan and you know, Mr. Chapman, and people that I've had a chance to know over the years, and quite frankly, I wasn't sure. I'm still not sure I'm in that league, but I was very honored to do that, and I had help from both Jim Duncan and Barbara Becker, who was the dean at University of Texas at Arlington, as well as you and the rest of the Texas APA sort of mentors, sort of the main group at Texas APA that have been fellows. You guys really helped us tremendously, and I was fortunate to be selected to become part of the College of Fellows, and it was such a signature element. I was incredibly honored to be elected into that very distinguished group of professional planners. It really made me feel like my career kind of raised a level in my own eyes. You know, you're always your biggest critic, and that was sort of an affirmation that this was a good career, okay. And I feel really good about that.
So you mentioned a number of mentors during your career. Are there any other mentors that you haven't mentioned that you want to talk about? Or
oh boy, you know, I know I'm going to miss some names, and I'll apologize in advance to those. But I really think the people I've mentioned really have put a really big play in how I think about my career professionally. But I would tell you also, you know, my wife Elizabeth and my son Eric and my daughter Stephanie have been really integral to my life, and I would go without saying that I'm incredibly proud of them, and I appreciate every bit of the support that they've been able to offer over the years. And you know, it's hard to move your family, and they were incredibly supportive, and they were all in it with me, and I very much appreciate that. I don't think I could have had the type of career I had without really that support, and those really are my mentors. I have a lot of good professional mentors I mentioned, but my family is really what drives me.
The flip side of the mentor question is proteges. Do you have any proteges,
Mm-hmm.
people you have mentored that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, you know, I really am. There's every place I've worked, I've found really some planners, particularly young planners, that have reached out and have had some interest in maybe allowing me to offer some of my thoughts. And there's a couple that come to mind directly. One, there's a woman named Michelle Haney. She used to work with me in Cary, North Carolina, and she moved on to Morrisville, North Carolina, and she was a very young planner when I hired her, and I've just been incredibly impressed with how she's moved forward in her career. And I don't get a chance to connect too much with her, but I know that over the years I've watched her grow professionally and been really happy about that. Most recently in Arlington, we have an incredible staff. You know, there's a lady that really runs our current planning section called Jincy Topol. And Jincy and I have worked together since I got here, and I've watched her grow from kind of a strategic planner working on some sector plans and some corridor plans, that type of thing, and some design standards, to really managing a very good, solid group of staff in the current planning section. And she's got a bright career in front of her, and it's been really, I've really enjoyed working with her. Our interim director is a woman named Bridget White, who I was here when I got here in Arlington, and she and I spent quite a bit of time together, and I'm incredibly impressed with her growth as a professional. In fact, she just finished authoring our city's next comprehensive plan. It was the first time she had done a comprehensive plan, and I had an opportunity to help talk to her about how those things work, and I am incredibly impressed with how she achieved that. And she achieved it with a very successful adoption fairly recently, where it was unanimous. And so little people like that, I've just been very fortunate over the years. There's a lot of really talented professionals that may need just a little bit of networking help, maybe just a little bit of mentoring help, and that's been really helpful for me. And I've also had the opportunity to teach at the University of Texas at Arlington a couple classes, a class every semester, and the students, of which one's on the camera right now, I've just found them to be incredibly energetic, self-motivated, talented, and for me, I've offered them whatever I can do to help them in their careers, help them in their academics. I'm happy to do that, and because that's how I gained professionally, was people helping me, and I definitely would like to do that.
Well, you mentioned that you went to UMass Amherst with the idea of getting into development, and I didn't hear that you ever got into that.
Yeah.
Do you have any regrets not doing that? Or?
No, I really didn't. I came very close to working for the Rouse Company. This was years and years ago. But I quite frankly, I don't regret that in the least. I think that my career, and kind of looking back and where I took a path from moving away from the real estate side, was really focused more on the people aspect. I thought that was probably a skill set that I had, and I also thought it was an interest that I had that probably trumped my interest in developing land and things like that. So I really don't regret it at all.
Okay. You also, in your career, have gone back and forth between the public sector and the consulting side. Do you have any recommendation for young planners about doing both, and what have you learned from each side?
That's great. I've been fortunate. I've worked in both areas. They offer wonderful opportunities. I don't think the public sector isn't any better than the private sector. The private sector isn't any better than the public sector. In fact, I would tell you that they're just different. And I think that my advice to a planner that's contemplating a career choice is focus on what that opportunity really looks like, understand it. The private consulting world, it's typically project-based. It's typically assignments that have an end date. So if you're inclined to kind of build your portfolio through a project process, that tends to work really well. The public side, one of the benefits of that is you can take a project and it's going to meander through the political process, which is fascinating as well. But you can find opportunities to really see it implemented at a longer term level, which certainly to some people is very interesting and enjoyable. But I guess my advice is, if it's the right opportunity, take it. And just because you start in one area doesn't mean you can't be in another area. There's very translatable skills, whether you're a private consultant or a staff planner in a public agency. And I think as long as your skills are strong, as long as you're self-motivated and you have an incredibly positive attitude. We do, as you know, you and I, we hire professional planners over the years, and I have learned, shifted my focus, quite frankly, from looking at someone that's got very strong technical skills to someone who has a great attitude. Attitude to a young planner is critically important. People want to work with people that they like and they can trust and they know are going to be motivated to do the right thing regardless of who's watching them. And for me, that attitude is really important, and the self-motivation and the ability to work independently. So those are all really important skills.
As you talked about your experience in the private sector, you talked about picking up management skills. Is that something that planners should learn more about in school? Or?
I don't know if you get it so much in school. I think what I would encourage professional planners to do that really feel a need to try to grow their management side is that when you get in an opportunity, whether that's a city or the private consulting world, that you spend time with managers. You start to see how they operate, how they make decisions, what goes into their decision processes. So feel free to shadow those people. Feel free to network with them. I think that's I believe in real life experiences. I believe that's the quickest way someone learns. I think certainly academically there's value in learning sort of management philosophy and the different styles and things like that, but until you actually practice it, I'm not sure you pick it up as well as you would if you can kind of see how it happens in action. And so that would be my advice to folks that want to get into that. The other thing is sometimes you got to take a career choice that gets you into that role. That's one of the reasons I moved from Raleigh, North Carolina to Arlington is I felt it was important for my career to be the director in a large department, large city department. So
there's always a natural tension between planning and development regulation and economic development. And in your current position, you have to consider both. Do you see that tension, or how have you handled that?
Yeah, I think like anything, you know, it's about those perspectives. You know, as a developer, you want to build it. You want to build it fast. You want to build it according to how you plan to do it. You know, there's some cost elements that certainly factor into how things are done. And certainly from a planning side, we certainly want the project to be done as well as we can. We tend to want to raise the bar on projects, you know, change out the design a little bit so that we think that it may address a little bit broader spectrum of needs than maybe the developer is interested in. So there's a tension there, but as long as it's done in a respectful, professional way, where there's a good dialogue and good communication, I think it can be really effective. Where it becomes a tension that becomes a conflict is where the communication isn't clear and where the sound reasoning isn't there to articulate why would the city be interested in doing this and the developer be interested in doing that. I think that that tension can become a conflict if it's not well thought out and well communicated. And occasionally we see that, but that's the beauty of having really good, talented staff. They're going to be able to articulate visions. They're going to be articulate perspectives, and they're also going to be able to listen. You know, that's a career skill, is being able to listen.
We've talked about your APA involvement. Are you involved in any other organizations that you want to mention?
No, those are really the ones that I'm mostly focused on.
Okay. And you mentioned your 2 kids. Either one of those interested in going into planning?
No, I don't think so. I think my daughter is incredibly creative. She's a wonderful writer. In fact, she wrote a play, a 1-act play that won an international playwright competition that she was able to go to London, England to see it performed. So I'm incredibly impressed with her, but she's very creative. And I think she's probably going to be more focused on her writing than as a professional planner. And my son is a college student, and he's very interested in international relations and, you know, the global society. So I think I'm not sure where he will end up in terms of his career, but I would think international relations or maybe probably not professional planning. But certainly if they're interested, I'd be happy to share it with them.
And so was your English and history degree of use to you in your career,
after all? You know, I don't want to oversell that it was incredibly important. I think it was most important I got my bachelor's degree so I could move on to my graduate school. But I think the English side, the ability to write, the ability to take an issue and define it concisely is a talent. And I think my undergraduate work in the English area was certainly advantageous for that. I think the history side, probably just from the standpoint of being able to see how other cultures, how decisions have been made over the years from a historical perspective. There's probably some translation of that in terms of understanding the big picture.
We've covered a lot of territory. Is there any area that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
Well, with that, then I'll thank you for your time. I enjoyed visiting with you.
Well, thank you very much, David.
Okay.